You've got your system configured with a Raid1 mirror and everything's working fine. But what happens when one of your drives decides to go south? I've got a basic Almalinux installation and I've reached the point where I can select the disk. I'm going to select two of the 20 gig disks that I have available and select the custom option instead of the automatic. Selecting custom will give you the option to select the RAID device. So we're going to create our first partition, which is going to be our boot partition. We'll make it 1 gig in size, which is more than enough. We want to tell it that it is a RAID partition, Raid1, which is mirroring, and leave the file system set to XFS. We will then come back and create our swap partition. Swap is normally twice the RAM, but this is a VM, so I'm only going to get it 5 gigs. Now for this one, instead of doing a standard partition, you want to tell it that it's a LVM partition, which is the logical volume. It suggests a group name for you, so you have to hit modify there. You've got both disks already selected, but you got to turn the RAID level to Raid1 so that it'll set up a mirror. Leave the size policy at the default. You can choose to encrypt it if you want to, but I'm not, just because this is just a sample install. And then I'll hit save there. And I want to come in and I want to create my root partition. And I'm just going to use whatever's left over. I know it's not 30 gigs, but the system will tell me what's available. So I've got 13.99 gigs available. And again, I want to tell it it's an LVM partition. It's going to create a volume group. And I'm going to set to RAID again. It's already set, so I'll just hit save. And I'll hit done. It gives me a summary of the changes and it shows me everything it's going to do. I hit accept. And I go ahead and I start the installation. And it goes through and it installs the RAID. It sets up the logical volumes on the RAID for me. So our system has rebooted and it's got the fully loaded RAID system on it. And you can see here it's Almalinux version 8.4. And we're going to follow a guide that I found over at How to Forge, and I'll put a link in the video so you can see it. It talks about replacing a failed hard drive in a software RAID, in a Raid1, which is a mirror. It gives you some examples here, so go ahead and read through that. One of the first things it wants you to look at is do a cat, which is to print out the value that's in /proc/md stat. So if we do that, we can see that we've got two RAID arrays set up on this device. It's labeled one as MD126 and the other as MD127. It shows that it's active It shows there's 2 disks available out of the 2 that are in the RAID, and both are up and running. That's what the U means they're up and running. So if we do a mount, we can see that dev 127, MD 127 is our boot partition that's mounted on that mirror. But if we look at the other mirror, we don't see the device because we set it up as a logical volume. So we see the LVM representation of it. So if we go back and look at this document, gives you some examples. And the thing that we're looking for is the MDADM-D. MDADM is the tool that you're going to use to manage the array. There's a man page for it that goes through all the different options that you have available. We're going to look at, after we did the cat, we see our 2 arrays are listed as MD 126 and 127. So we want to get some information on that. All right, for the 126, we see that it's a almost 19 gig array. The state is clean, which is good. And you see the 2 devices that are in the array. The VDA is the first drive. The number 2 represents the second partition on the drive. Same with this, the VDB is the second drive. The 2 is the second partition on the drive. So if we go and look at our other array, which is 127, see that it's about 1 gig in size, and that's the boot partition that we created. And the installation put a label on it and called it Alma Raid1 boot. And you can see the devices in there, the first drive, VDA, and the first partition, and the second drive, VDB, and the first partition. So these 2 drives are in an active RAID, and the state is clean. Now for that logical volume, if we do a PB display to look at our physical volumes, we see that dev MD 126, which is one of the arrays, is a part of a volume group named Almalinux Raid1. So if we do a VG display to look at our volume groups, see that we have this volume group, we see the type, and we see the size of it. Okay, the volume group is assigned to a logical volume. So we do a LV display. And we've got 2 logical volumes here. One is our swap, which is our swap partition that we created. And you can see that it is 5 gigs in size. The other logical volume is the root volume, and it is 13.98 gigs in size. So we've got logical volumes sitting on top of a RAID volume. Now for this next part, we're going to switch over And we've got tmux running some commands here for us. The mdadm command -d on the MD126 is going to give us information about the array that's 126. What we want to keep an eye on is the state, because it says it's clean here. Over here, we're going to continuously run a cat on the proc mdstat. And we want to keep looking at the status for active and these two letters here, which means both drives are active. So we've got the system running, we've got the RAID set up, we've got the logical volumes. So what we want to do is we want to simulate a failure of the disk. So let's see how we do that. It says we want to mark it as failed and remove it from the RAID array. Okay. So we're going to look at the first RAID array, which is 126. And we're going to simulate that the primary disk is failed. So VDA is going to fail. And the commands that I'm typing are in this document, so just go back and read it. So we're going to first take VDA out of the 126 RAID array. So that's VDA and the second partition. So the command they list is mdadm manage 126 is our array. We're going to tell it to fail. And the device, yeah, it's VDA. Here it is over here. We're in 126, and we want to fail VDA2. So it's dev VDA2. All right, it tells us VDA2 is faulty in the 126 array. You see our state changed to clean, degraded. And over here, you see that the first disk is not available in the array anymore. So we're going to completely simulate a disk failure by removing VDA1 from the 127 RAID array. So it's the same command, except you're typing the array is 127, which is here. And VDA is using 1, which is partition 1. So we're going to say VDA1. And it says it's faulty. We have to change this one over here to 127. And we see that it's clean and degraded. Now we see that the first device in the RAID array is not available. Okay. So we've got a RAID there, and it's degraded because we failed the first disk. So we're going to continue on down here. We've done all that. Yep. Now they also want to remove the disk from the array. So we failed it first. Now we're going to remove it from the array. And again, this is just simulating a failure. If the disk actually would fail, you would see this here where one of the disks is not available, but under your state, you would have one of them as removed. Going back over here, it says to remove it, it's just a dash remove command with the other command that we've already typed. So we'll do the 126 instead of a dash dash fail, we'll do a dash dash remove. It says it was hot removed from 126. And you see on 126 it's active and there's only one disk listed here. Okay, because we removed it. And there's the representation that we are missing the first disk, but the second disk is still there. And we're going to do the same with the other one. Instead of fail, we're going to remove. And we get the same thing. And 127, VDB1 is the only one available, and you see only one is up here. So right now, both of our arrays are running with one disk, one single disk. Now, if the drive had actually failed, this is the state that it would be in. It would be removed. And again, it says clean, comma, degraded. So what we have to do is we have to get rid of that old disk and replace it with a new one. And it tells you in the instructions here, we want to power down the system. If you can, do a shutdown -H. Now this is the VM, so I'm going to shut it down here. Okay, that VM's been shut down. So what I have to do here is get rid of the old disk, and I've labeled them as RAID disk-1 for the first disk and RAID disk-2 for the second disk. So we're simulating a failure of disk 1, so we're going to remove it, but then we're going to add a replacement disk. And the replacement disk, I called it -3, and there's nothing on it. I'll go finish. So my disk 1 now is the original second disk, and my disk 2 now is the number 3 disk that's been replaced. Make sure we're not booting to CD-ROM. So when we go to boot this, when the system first boots, it's going to try to find all the disk in the RAID array. It's not going to find it, so it's going to take it a while to boot. It's going to sit there for a few minutes. So it didn't find it. But it came back up fine, running on a single disk because it was a RAID array. And you can see we're still mounted on dev MD127. I'm going to have to switch back to a terminal screen to see that though. So I lost my connection. I got to reconnect. Let me go back to it. And it's not running my things. I have to DH clients. It's 4. I will, of course, cut this part out and come back to it. So back at the machine, we booted back up. If we do status on our 126, you see now that the drive has been removed. the state is still clean and degraded. Now, again, if the drive fails altogether and it doesn't work, it can't get any power or anything, it will be in this state. It'll be in a removed state. And you do the same thing, you look at 127. It's got a removed state there. So the only one active is VDB1. Okay, now they talk about adding a new hard disk. So what you have to do is you have to get the same partitioning scheme that you have on the existing disk on the new disk. And this is the command that you would run to do that. But you want to make sure you're using the right disk. So I am going to copy this. Now VDB is my active drive, so I want to copy from VDB to VDA. So if I do a fdisk-l, and compare that to what's on A, you see they don't match, so it wouldn't work correctly. So I'm going to copy their command. And they did a -d WB. So we're telling this command that we want to take the partitioning scheme that's on disk B and copy that to disk A. All right, it tells us partition has a Linux RAID signature, which we know. So if we go back and look at that, A now matches B, okay? And we verified that. So now what we have to do is we have to add the new drive back to the existing array. So what we do to do that is it uses the -add command. So we removed it with the remove command, and we're going to add it back in. So to add the A disk back into the array, the command that they list is mdadm-manage dev md126 add. All right, we've got VDB and we've got the second partition. So we want to add VDA and the second partition. And that's going to add VDA's second partition to the MD126 RAID array. So you hit enter and it says added. And you get a screen right here that tells you it's in recovery. So you let that go on and recover, and it will actually mirror the partition from the existing disk to the new disk. and we will come back when that recovery is done. And that rebuild took about 8 minutes. That's 8 minutes on a VM running under Ubuntu. Now we have to do the same thing with the Well, before we do that, we see that it's clean now and that both of the drives are available to the array. So if we go look at 127, it is still degraded. There's 127, and it's still removed. 126, which is what we just added, is back in sync, so it's ready to go. So we're going to go back and add the A drive to our 127 array, MDADM 127. Here's 127. We want to add disk A's first partition. So it's dev VDA and the first partition. Yep, typed it wrong. Tab MD. Hold on, that's dev VDA1. I got the wrong device there. Get rid of that. So that's MD127, which is right here, which is our second array. And we're going to add disk A back to the array. All right, it says it's added VD1, and it's starting the recovery, which is rebuilding the array. It'll go much faster because it's a smaller disk. Okay, now the state is clean, and both drives are in the array. And both are active. So if you've got an existing system that already has a RAID on it, you might just want to go in and run some of those MDADM commands and document how it's set up. And the first place you'll look is the proc MDSTAT. When you look at that, that's going to give you your RAID arrays that you have configured, and it's going to tell you what disks and partitions that they're on. So you might want to just go ahead and make note of that. And that was a short example on how to set up a Raid1 and how to replace a drive that's failed in that Raid1. Thanks for watching.